unfortunately in Australia, we're very comfortable with non-First Nations peoples playing the role of advising executives, advising boards, advising organisations on how to engage and interact with First Nations peoples.
Welcome to The Greener Way. I'm your host, Michelle Baltazar, Executive Director of Media at FS Sustainability. We are recording on Gadigal land and we pay our respects to the traditional custodians of country and elders past, present, and emerging. In this episode, we're diving into a major topic that will be featured at the upcoming RIAA Conference titled Indigenous Cultural Heritage Protection, Investor Risk and Responsibility. This highly anticipated panel session is a conversation shaped by the lasting impact of the 2020 destruction of Juukan Gorge and the emergence of First Nations-led standards, which we will discuss today, including the Dawara Business and Investor Initiative, or the Remembering Country Business and Investor Initiative. All of this designed to ensure that such a tragedy never happens again. We're honored to be joined by one of the panel speakers, Kado Muir, who is the chair of the National Native Title Council and the chair of the Wakamuru Aboriginal Corporation, RNTBC. Kado's leadership is recognized across multiple platforms. Not only does he have the role of chair of the NNTC and the Wakamuru Aboriginal Corporation, but his profile reflects a career dedicated to cultural heritage protection, environmental justice, and strengthening First Nations' voice in decision-making. Kado, it's a pleasure to have you.
Thank you, Michelle. I'm pleased to be here and sharing this thoughts and looking forward to the RIAA Conference.
Yes, we are proud to be the media partner of the conference again this year. We're very supportive of what RIAA does, including being part of raising awareness around this Remembering Country Business and Investor Initiative. So I'll probably start with a question on what are the practicalities of showing what responsible investment is. So what I mean by that is that what are the steps that investors and boards should take to embed First Nations-led cultural heritage governance and embed that into their investment due diligence and portfolio stewardship?
At the risk of some self-promotion, I have created a scorecard that draws on both the Darughilan initiative, but also on other initiatives like the Ask First document, which the Australian Heritage Commission put out many, many years ago, 30 plus years ago now.
Mm-hmm.
So there's no lack of content and materials. I think it's more a lack of incentive and imperative to put country first. And to the listeners, you can find these scorecards on my website at kadomuir.com.au. The framing of those scorecards, though, is around this idea that we need to do an assessment, self-assessment. So the tools are all out there. You look at reconciliation action plans. So you can't look at the Darughilan Investor Initiative in isolation.
Mm-hmm.
Needs to be considered in the context of the broader relationship and expectations of communities. So the key things are, what's the risk? And Juukan identified a massive risk, but Juukan is an internal governance issue on the part of the company, and I think the CEOs themselves, the executive, paid the cost of that risk. But it still reflects a culture of inability to engage and a culture of ignorance. And then stacking on top of that, the ignorance stacks onto incompetence, effectively. And so the reason why I'm sort of spreading the response widely is you really need to look at things like, do you have First Nations perspectives in the room? And that then flows back to, how do you ensure First Nations perspectives is in the room? So you can have protocols, you can have initiatives and all of that, but the core initiative is seeking and securing people with the expertise to be able to advise and support. And unfortunately in Australia, we're very comfortable with non-First Nations peoples playing the role of advising executives, advising boards, advising organisations on how to engage and interact with First Nations peoples. So, summing that up, the core thing is Darrawangillan Investors Initiative is the tip of the iceberg. Below that are already functioning systems like reconciliation action plans. Some companies out there, so I recognise this is for investors, but investors really need to sharpen their tool or their pencils. On the horizon, you see these massive compensation liabilities that come from, and I'll just mention 3 projects, big mining projects. As of last Friday, the 27th of February, the MacArthur River native title compensation claim decision was handed down by the federal court, and that awarded $54 million to the traditional owners for cultural loss. So the impact on their ability to practice and exercise their culture. That's $54 million. That's one project. And that project was not without its controversy throughout its life. There's still a massive environmental impact from that project. So that's one decision. Also last week, the Bunjima people took the state government to court in relation to the Whitnoom project. CSR, which was a darling of the Australian Stock Exchange for many years, was the company that ran that mine, had all the asbestosis-related impacts. And what's going on there now is the fact that the country, so if we're remembering country, the country is becoming toxic to the traditional owners, and they can't exercise their cultural rights. They can't engage in sustenance and other economic activities. And the third one, just to excite some controversy, is the Argyle diamond mine. 40 to 50 years of mining operations, countless billions of dollars worth of wealth generated. And now there's media, commentary I've noticed out there about a fortnight ago, where there's a complete misalignment between priorities. And in the reporting I did see, the traditional owners are talking about the impact on their ability to engage and participate in their country, so the remembering country bit. The company is talking about cultural heritage management plans, and the real impact is the PFAS, I think, the forever chemicals. And so when you pull all this together into an ESG framework, you start to recognise that environment, social and governance are not well aligned and are falling short. So, and this is the thing, to your listeners, the investors, these are the people who are enabling and facilitating this wanton and whole-scale destruction through a convenience veil of ignorance that seems to protect them, and everyone kicks the ball down the road. But it's not also the investors' community, it's also federal government initiatives. So we also see last month I think the Biodiversity Council of Australia identifying federal government funding that is contributing to biodiversity loss. And so everyone talks the talk, but no one walks the walk, Michelle.
And I think that that's where this crisis still exists, and it's getting worse unless it's prevented. So I can imagine how interesting this conversation at the conference is going to be, not least it's 5 years since the destruction of the Juukan Gorge, and you've just pointed out the 3 events that happened in the last couple of weeks. So we've got the tools, but we need investors to start walking the walk, not just talking the talk. Do you see that there'd be more interest now than before, seeing that there's the real financial risk as well? Let's say the 54 million or other compensations that could come from those issues.
Yeah, no, totally. I mean, these are intergenerational legacies and burdens. And so the compensation that's being claimed and the compensation that's being awarded is back to the state. So the government. Now, there are 2 things that the government needs to do, because that's the first point of interaction. And I've seen this occur in a few instances in some, a native title determination that I'm involved in, but elsewhere, where the state is reducing its future liability by recognising the existence of native title on parts of land that 20 years ago they would have insisted an extinguishment event occurred. So the extinguishment of recognition of native title rights and interests, today they're being a bit less aggressive and recognising that native title rights have survived. That then flows on to, in these steps, the way it steps out is you lodge a native title claim is determined, and then the traditional owners or the native title holders get together to identify where on their territory or their lands the government took land away and gave it to a third party. Main engagement is mining, but it's also housing subdivisions, it's construction of infrastructure facilities. And in many of these cases, the recipient of that land would go away and build and develop and generate a business that's funded by investors. The key factor that they miss out is native title is multi-generational and it's forever. So at one point, traditional owners will come back and seek damages for any irresponsible or wanton destruction of their country. And that then, who pays that liability? One of my favourite comments I recall from Philip Adams, old ABC presenter years ago, where he was talking about a particular sector or group in society who privatised their profits and socialised their losses. And that's not going to be a sustainable economic model for industries. And I think government will turn to, one project, one area, $54 million. The next claim, there are 300 determinations across Australia, another 300 claims in the process, and government will be looking to allocate that cost somewhere. And that's a major risk for investors if you continue to invest in projects that have these or create and generate these liabilities, because it doesn't have to be that way. That's the key thing. You can actually find ways to, which the government is doing in its determination process, is going, okay, well, we don't have to create or generate a liability here. And that's the core of where Darrawangillan and these kinds of contributions that we from the First Nations sector of Australia are providing to the investment community is to say, hey, you guys, set up a screen, look at, do a scorecard analysis, and then identify where your key risks are, and then identify those First Nations people you can sit down and work with our governance institutions, which are, are the organisations that are set up to support First Nations peoples. Sit down, work out strategies to do less harm, and that's actually a benefit to everyone. It's if you shift the analysis of wealth away from just financial metrics and look at natural capital, look at social capital, well-being, stuff like that. So, and this is part of a traditional First Nations Indigenous understanding of wealth, is healthy country means healthy people.
Healthy country, healthy people, healthy economy. So
Exactly.
it's getting out of that vicious cycle of environmental destruction, investors losing money, so it's not like it just disappears as well, and into this vicious cycle of, into this virtuous cycle of having a healthy environment and healthy people, as you've rightly pointed out. There's definitely plenty to unpack, but one last question about this, the Business and Investor Initiative, Remembering Country. You've already said earlier a very important point, and that is just have a First Nations people in the room when you're having these discussions. I think that already can make a massive difference. But in terms of the culturally appropriate indicators, if you like, I mean, is there hope in standardizing processes across the investment community that truly kind of plugs in the interests and the custodianship of First Nations in whatever we do?
It's possible, but it's not possible without us. All the dreams of people who are not us end up in nightmares down the track. And this is where investors have the ability to influence across ASX 200 listed companies how many First Nations or Indigenous, Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people are on their boards. Would you know, Michelle?
Well, I can estimate that it's less than 1%, but I wouldn't know. So there's what is it? What is the number?
Well, I don't know the number, but I do know that there are 2 companies out there that have the same person as their Indigenous capacity director. And I think he's alone. I think there was a article that quoted him at one stage of where are the other First Nations directors of ASX 200 listed companies. And this is like a complete blind spot. Most of the initiatives and the actions that occur is to bring First Nations people into junior positions within the organisation, heap them with a load of burden on capability and compliance, and sit comfortably in the directors' chairs or the C-suite, comfortable in position, but they should be squirming in their chairs if they don't have First Nations people actively engaged in these decision-making, as I highlighted with the fact that there is a massive economic shift about to happen with all these claims that are going through the federal court and through treaty recognition processes, all of those sort of things. So I'd really urge, people to start seriously looking at it today, taking action today, because the pattern I've noticed through Australia is they're blissfully ignorant and continuing the process of extraction and exploitation. When we catch up, there's this massive surprise and calls for government to change the laws. There's too much black tape, all that sort of stuff. Whereas strategic planning, strategic engagement, and being serious about it will avert all those problems.
I think if you can still count the number of board positions, then we still have a problem. But as you rightly pointed out, it's about putting in First Nations leadership at the center of investment practice and making your work, the cultural heritage protection, a non-negotiable component of long-term value.
Absolutely, yeah. No, I mean, I am very concerned that the federal government has taken, 5+ years before they've fully responded to the Juukan Gorge incident. We did see Western Australia make an attempt to respond and introduce laws, but they then subsequently withdrew those laws. And so really, in Australia, 5 years after Juukan, we still have no clear governance framework that focuses on protecting culture, protecting heritage, and these special places that are unique to, our human history.
I wish I can say something that would wrap this all up in a neat little package. But the good thing is that this topic will be discussed at the conference. And I hope that the audience there will realize what you've just talked about and how 5 years after Juukan Gorge, something should have changed. Once again, Kado, thank you so much for joining us. And I look forward to seeing you at the conference.
Thank you, Michelle. I will add one point there just as a positive note for the investors. The Darrawingilan initiative is something that has come out of this Juukan incident. And what it points to is a sector that is taking some responsibility and saying, okay, this is our attempt to try and create a better future. And so, yeah, it's actually a positive development, and the fact that RIAA is continuing to engage in this sort of discussion shows that there's a level of interest that gives confidence for us all.
It's a step in the right direction, but I'm with you in saying we can do more. So we'll end it there. But once again, Kado, thank you for joining us. This is The Greener Way. I'm Michelle Baltazar. Thank you for joining us.
The Greener Way podcast is a product of FS Sustainability. All information in this podcast is for education and entertainment purposes only. It is not intended as a substitute for professional, legal, or tax advice. Before making any financial decisions, you should read the product disclosure statement, and if necessary, consult a licensed financial professional. For more information, head to the disclaimer page on the FS Sustainability website, fssustainability.com.au.